in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up this week, we discover that urgent amendments are needed to the law with regard to doctors who are under investigation for unethical behaviour or even criminal offences. As things stand, the Medical Association cannot intervene.
After 8 days of going through the police investigation, he was freed until the whole case reached the court case, and at this stage we don't have any power in suspending a license or cross off his name from the Doctors Association.
And on a lighter note, a new app can take you on tours of Nicosia's monuments.
The tours are in 8 languages actually. Greek, Turkish, English, French, German, Spanish, Italian and Russian.
Well, of course, since the pandemic, our medical services and our doctors are very much overworked and very much in the news. The sad news, of course, recently is that there have been a few cases of possible fake COVID vaccination cards, and I believe the police are investigating. But I've asked the president of the Cyprus Medical Association, Dr. Petros Agathangelu, to join me. First of all, Petros, can you explain to people what the Medical Association does? Because I know it's not the same as the Medical Council.
Quite right. What it means, Cyprus Medical Association is a regulatory body that basically gives the license to the practising physicians in Cyprus, and of course its aim is to enhance the quality services provided to the Cyprus residents, and most importantly is to enhance the continuing medical education of the doctors in order to achieve the high quality and high standard of healthcare services delivery to all citizens and to all residents of Cyprus. So the regulatory body basically is governed by the existing law, which specifically has to do with the Cyprus Medical Association. So it's a regulatory body governed by legislation, by law. So any actions or any of the decisions have to be met according to the governing of the law that has to be obeyed. The Medical Council is another regulatory body which acts as an official advisory board to the Ministry of Health that has to do with the registration of the doctors' qualifications and diplomas. So the two bodies have a kind of collaboration, as the Cyprus Medical Association always is represented to the Medical Council by 4 doctors that have been suggested by the Cyprus Medical Association and be appointed by the Ministry Council and of course by the Ministry of Health. When it comes to the doctors' qualifications, the authenticity of the diplomas and the certificates of specialization that have to do with the law that governs the Cyprus Medical Council. Once this is being accredited and is being registered, then the doctors have to be registered in the registry of the Doctors Association that has to be registered and of course give the license to practice.
But if I, as a doctor, ask to join the Cyprus Medical Association, you will, of course, first check with the Medical Council that all my...
Absolutely right, quite right.
Do you have a code of conduct as the Medical Association?
Of course we do. Of course we do. And in fact, since our taking over of the Cyprus Medical Association, back in 2016, we have realized the unmet needs, that there are gaps into the existing legislation that requires amendment and it requires to be modernized, both in terms of Cyprus Medical Association, also with regards to the Cyprus Medical Council. And we have gone through a lot of suggestions, and we have gone also through the process of how we can take a better and more specific and substantial authority to the association in order to suspend licenses when there are cases that it's obvious that there is an underlying case of crime, especially when it's quite apparent and obvious, something that at this stage we cannot do because we always await, according to the final outcome of the justice's process and procedures that take place, the outcome of which we then have to take action immediately pending on the decision, and the action is followed by another procedure which is called the deontology committee that we have in the Cyprus Medical Association, which basically accepts any kind of cases that can be reached at the association's secretarial offices where there are cases where there is a suspicion of medical ethics issues that will be discussed with the committee, and if the committee judges accordingly that this has to be referred to the Cyprus Medical Association's council, the council goes over it, and based on the decision, either it will be given some sort of a notice to the doctor, or will be referred for what we call referral to the disciplinary board. A disciplinary board is an independent board which deals as what we call the judge's kind of approach that relates purely to doctors' cases.
How long does all of this procedure take?
Oh, that's because of this very, very long procedural process. We don't like it. That's why we need modernization of the existing law in order to be able, for example, the cases where it's obvious there is a kind of a crime, that I will be able immediately to give suspension of the license to the doctor involved in order to be able at least to give some time for the civil court to go ahead with their normal procedures to take place, and pending on the outcome, then we will be able to judge accordingly. And that's why now at this stage we cannot intervene during the process where the police and all the proper procedures are being followed up by the local authorities. We cannot intervene. However, we are in contact and we are close collaborators to the procedures, but on the other hand, we don't have the law that will support this kind of a preliminary action by the regulatory body, namely the Cyprus Medical Association, where the suspension of the license will be immediately upon these at least obvious cases that seems that there is a crime case.
Petros, I'm sorry, I need to be clear on this. Are you telling me that the association can do absolutely nothing? Now, is it until the police bring charges or until a court case finds the defendant guilty?
Until the court finds the defendant
guilty. So that could be 10 years.
It doesn't give charges. The police goes through the investigation process.
But that could be 10 years before our courts get round to dealing with issues like this.
I'm not going to get involved into the legal aspects of this particular process. That's why 3 weeks ago we had a very productive meeting with the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, the Minister of Health, and stakeholders in order to pinpoint on these gaps that we realize in the process of investigation a obvious crime case, and we are in the process with the very, very urgent manner in order to come up with some quick decisions that will take place at the level of the Member of Parliament in order to be able to have some sort of amendments early enough, especially in this kind of cases.
OK, but you did say, I'm pretty sure I heard you say at the beginning of our chat, it was several minutes ago now, that you first made suggestions back in 2015 for changes to the law.
2016, but at the time, what everybody was concerned is just only what we call the issue, the healthcare reform at the time. And we have pinpointed that even with the implementation of the new healthcare system in Cyprus, certain issues that has to do with the existing legislation will require amendments and will require modernization, both in at the level of the Ministerial Council, Medical Council and Cyprus Medical Association, in order to be able to even face issues that probably have to do with medical ethics, medical deontology, medical practice, medical erroring, and all kind of things. So it's not just a simple thing, it's a whole field of healthcare services that they need to be protected by modernized legislation. So we all feel that both doctors' community, also the citizens of Cyprus, to feel safe and secure when it comes to the delivery of healthcare services.
Right, can I ask whether or not I've understood correctly that actually at the moment the Medical Association really can't impose sanctions on doctors who infringe your code?
If they're in the process of the police investigation that will reach a court, we do await for the final outcome, and we proceed further to our procedure in order to refer further the doctors involved or who has been given a charger of a crime case to the disciplinary board, which is an independent board. But this has to be referred by the Cyprus Medical Association following the advice of the deontological committee of the association.
It seems an awfully long, drawn-out process when there are patients there who don't actually know whether or not the doctor that they're seeing is under investigation.
Rest assured that this unmet need, this gap, has been pinpointed many times. Why? Because even the vivid example is what happened lately, that a doctor has been arrested with the suspicion of a crime case. After 8 days of going through the police investigation, he was freed until the whole case reached the court case, and at this stage we don't have any power in suspending a license or cross off his name from the Doctors Association.
Well, it's all very worrying. Let me ask you finally, if I may, about the fact that we know that a lot of doctors and nurses here have not been vaccinated, but more worrying, that's their choice of course, is that some doctors are apparently encouraging their patients not to get vaccinated. What is the view of the association on that?
It was quite clear since the initial stage of the pandemic that our guideline is clear that the only tool that we have in our hands in countering and manage the COVID-19 nowadays is vaccination. And we have urged everybody, especially the doctors and nurses. Of course, the nurses have their own association, but as we call the medical professionals and everybody who's involved in the hospital care, in the outpatient care, we all urge everybody to be vaccinated in order to minimize first the transmissibility of the virus, secondly to minimize the severe severe form of the illness that will require hospitalization and even will require a further high-level care of treatment, like getting into intensive care units, and exert further hygienomic pressure on the newly implemented healthcare system. So the guideline in the instruction was quite clear. The issue of the imposing as mandatory to be vaccinated, this is an issue that has to do with the Constitution, and it's an issue that has to do with the government. However, as a professional body, we have urged everybody to be vaccinated. Now, if a minute minority of our members go against the guidance of what the regulatory body dictates with regards to the management, to the kind of the management that has been authorized by the international guidelines with regards to COVID, both at the level of outpatient care, so also at the level of inpatient care, then what happens there is that we call in the doctors to see why do they advise differently. We have the power in doing that, we have the strength of doing that. However, again, there is an issue of what we call the freedom of expressing an opinion, but the problem here is that expressing an opinion on a personal level, if that opinion goes against what the guidelines dictate, and this difference of opinion will endanger the health and the life of patients, it's something that we need to tackle down and give us even more strength to have a different kind of imposing sanctions to these doctors. But like I said, this is something that has to be with, again, amendment of the existing law when it comes to mandatory vaccination.
No, I don't think anybody was suggesting mandatory vaccinations. I think the concern here is that qualified doctors, who presumably read the science as well as everybody else, are, in a sense, as you say, possibly putting their personal feelings ahead. But if they're giving that advice to their patients, it seems you're telling me there isn't anything you can do about it.
I cannot get control on everybody's authorities. No one. The most important thing, however, if you notice over the last couple of weeks, the doctors that have been delivering their personal opinion on COVID have been in a specialization that has nothing to do with internal medicine or infectious disease specialty. I cannot accept that a neurosurgeon expresses an opinion because he's a doctor, but he's a neurosurgeon, but he expresses an opinion on infectious disease level of knowledge in order to advise patients or express publicly opinion that the vaccine is not safe and it's not effective. So these kind of doctors will be called in for sure. But again, there is a need of a legal action as well, because for many other vaccination programs on a national level have been included, and no one really protested to that.
Yeah, and we all know, Pedros, unfortunately, how long any amendments to the law here in Cyprus take and how long it takes our MPs to actually agree on pretty well anything. We have to end it there. We're out of time.
I need to empower everybody who is involved, both at the level of members of the parliament, the executive committees of all ministries involved, the government, the regulatory bodies, to get together and spit out the process that needs to be leading the modernization of the existing legislation in order to bring up amendments that will honestly give an umbrella of safety for the pandemics to come. Because if COVID will be completed, that doesn't mean that we already completed the wave of pandemia and we will wait another 20 years to see what next. We need to be proactive on the issue.
Well, let's hope that the relevant stakeholders are indeed proactive. A pleasure talking to you. Petros Agathangelu, President of the Cyprus Medical Association. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share with you what exactly is the real world, what is happening when it comes to these sensitive issues that really concerns everybody, especially amid the pandemic.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
The Centre for Visual Arts and Research is open after the summer holidays with lots of exhibitions and lectures and all sorts of things going on. We're going to find out about that shortly, but they've just announced that they now have an app. What does it do? Their director, Rita Severis, joins us to explain.
Our app is something very, very interesting and something very important for us. We're doing free tours of Nicosia, the old city. And these tours are not just audio tours, they're audiovisual tours. We use material from the museum, old paintings, old photographs of each and every stop that you will have on the way during your tour of Nicosia. And it's North and South Nicosia. It takes about 2 hours for each tour to walk through at your own pace, at a good pace, a relaxed pace, and to see the monuments. And you hear the story, not only of the monuments, but of the people that lived in them, what happened, various events, various stories of stories that are really not known. Let's put it this way.
Are you the person who's doing the tour? Because I know that when I've been on tours with you, physical tours with you, you've said the stories that aren't known. You're talking about the scandals. Come on, you know all the backstories and everybody goes,
right, yes.
What?
Yes, correct. I do the tour, but I don't speak. The tours are in 8 languages, actually. Greek, Turkish, English, French, German, Spanish, Italian, and Russian. And depending on what language your phone has, it turns automatically to that language. The app appears in that language. This is app number 1. But then there's app number 2, which is the religious monuments of Nicosia. So we just concentrate on the religious monuments. And then there's app number 3, which is the tour of the walls of Nicosia. Now tell me, how many people know the bastions of Nicosia? Not many.
No.
How many people knew the old names of the bastions? And what happened at each bastion during the medieval wars, during the Ottoman attack? Not many. So it's quite interesting to hear about them and what was outside each bastion, what stood there before the Venetians pulled down the old walls, the Lusinian walls. And finally, we have an app for families and children, a treasure hunt in Nicosia, which leads you at the end to the museum, where, if you manage to find the treasure, you get it.
It all sounds fascinating. Whose idea was it to put all this together? Because the technology involved must have been quite difficult.
Well, to tell you the truth, we won an award from Creative Europe, the European Union Council, and we suggested this. And they liked the idea, so we won the award, which paid for the app.
Right, and you've had it developed, but now then, if I download it, I walk around old Nicosia, physically like you used to do in person,
exactly.
But my phone is my guide.
Yes, and you listen and you see. You stand in front of, for example, let's say, Bayraktar Mosque, and you look at it as it is today, but then you look at your phone and you'll see old pictures of it, or old paintings of it, how it was in the 19th century or in the early 20th century. And this goes on with every stop we have.
And does it mean that it's also on a location basis? So depending on whether you walk fast or slow, when you get to the next monument, then it will see that you're there and begin...
You will press.
Ah, okay.
You will press. There is a map with all the monuments on it. You can start from wherever you want, and you just press. On the monument, there's a little red dot, and it starts telling you the story. Sometimes it walks with you telling you the story, but we'll see.
It does sound like a brilliant idea. What's been the feedback? Have many people downloaded it?
I think so, yes. The people that did the app are quite happy. I don't know much about technology, I can't count, but they said that it was quite successful.
Doing well.
Yeah.
Well, that's something for people to look forward to, particularly as the weather cools down a little bit.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It's rather nicer to walk around.
Yes. And it's free.
That's true.
And it's in 8 languages, which is important.
Now, tell us about the events that you've got coming up in September. It's a pretty packed programme.
Yes, it is. On the 13th of September, we have Dr. Cristina Rodoridu, who is the manager of our library, who will speak about the monetary iconography in Cyprus. And she will give the lecture with illustrations. And she will concentrate more on the colonial period. On the 15th of this month, we have Helen Pontikis presenting her book, Are You This or Are You This? And that sounds very, very interesting. The person that inspired her will be here and will talk about himself. Then on the 24th, we have Sevina Zisimu, who will talk about the Whispers of the Tombstones and the Women Dervishes.
Women dervishes?
Yes, women dervishes. I didn't know there were women dervishes, but there you are, there were women dervishes, which is very, very interesting. I'm dying to hear what she has to say. Yes, here in Cyprus. And there are tombstones.
Of the women dervishes?
Yes, of the women dervishes.
Where are they?
Well, come to the lecture.
And then what? Running all the way through until Christmas?
And then we have the Spanish Embassy has been kind enough to sponsor 3 lectures, one on Berengaria, one on the Spanish travelers, and one on Ali Bey El Abbasi, the famous Catalan traveler, and professors are coming from Spain for this. We also have Athina Hierodiagonou, the wonderful exhibition of ceramics and workshops for children. Then in November we have, this is an exhibition on Grunenberg, who is one of the first German travelers to Cyprus and who has made the first illustrations of Cyprus. Very, very old. 1452. So we are bringing photographs from Germany of the manuscript with the illustrations of Cyprus and his text. And we will have the curator of Branden's library from Germany to come and give us a lecture on Grunenberg. And we will close the year with something completely different from Sevilla, with an exhibition of women artists, 6 Greek Cypriots and 6 Turkish Cypriot artists, on the topos and the people. And this is not going to be an ordinary exhibition that you're used to at CVR, where you have the panels and the paintings are hanging on the panels at the ground floor exhibition room. This is going to be spread all over the museum and amongst the already standing exhibits. So I'm really curious to see what this is going to be all about. But it sounds very promising. The artists are very excited. They're visiting the museum to be inspired by the museum for their works. It's something completely different for them and for us.
And where can people see all of this written down? Because you have a website, you're on Facebook, I think.
Yes, we're putting things out slowly. We've just opened on Monday. We've just opened, and so we send our newsletter to our followers, and slowly we'll be putting up things on the web.
Well, if you haven't visited, do. The CVAR is in Old Nicosia. It stands for the Centre for Visual Arts and Research, and we've been talking to their director, Rita Severis. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.